Can the New York Mets really keep running Jose Quintana out there in their starting rotation?
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. Want to find any of my work? Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use the code, all in lowercase, LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Now, the New York Mets had that great emotional victory on Monday, and you wanted to see them go out on Tuesday and build off that, capitalize, win a second game, win a series against the Baltimore Orioles, maybe go on a run this week. Maybe you put together a winning streak. The problem with being able to put together winning streaks sometimes is just bad starting pitching. And if you have a hole in your rotation, it's going to prevent you from going on a consistent run. And unfortunately, in the month of August, Jose Quintana has been that sore spot in the rotation. And it showed up again here on Tuesday night. Going into the series, when I previewed what the Mets had going up against the Orioles, I talked about the importance of winning game one because of game two, because I wasn't sure what Jose Quintana was going to bring to the Mets in this one. And unfortunately, it is what we have come to expect lately, which is a bad performance. In this one, a really bad performance, giving up 7 runs. Now, it all starts in the first inning where he throws a hanging curveball to Anthony Santander that he puts in the seats, and immediately the Mets are in a 2-0 hole before they even get their first at-bat. Now, the Mets did not score through the first 3 innings. Quintana gave up another run in the second. It was a very strange play where Brandon Nimmo was going back on a ball, ends up sort of crashing into the wall, hits off of his glove, but he doesn't actually reel it in. Then it's off of his bare hand, and then somehow he ends up catching it. But what was ruled out in the field, once we saw the replay, was clearly a ball that hit off the wall. So it ends up being a triple, and that run comes in to score on a sacrifice fly from James McCann. But I will say there was a moment where I thought that Jose Quintana had sort of figured it out. He has a clean third inning, and the Mets score in the bottom of the third inning. They get 2 walks to lead off that frame. There's a couple outs after that. Was it Lindor and who else? 2 guys struck out. I apologize that I'm blanking on the second one. But Mark Vientos hit an RBI double. So you were getting closer. Unfortunately, 2 runners got stranded in that inning. You go back out there, though, thinking, all right, if Jose Quintana can put up a couple more zeros, the Mets can just get back into it inning by inning, and maybe they can still win this game. Unfortunately, the 4th inning was another disaster for Quintana as he gave up 3 runs, and 2 of them coming on a home run by James McCann. Mind you, the Mets paid James McCann more money to play in this game than the Orioles did. And ultimately, that's pretty much the game. Quintana in the 5th inning gives up another run on an RBI double from Milo Jimenez, and you're just not going to win a lot of games where you start in a 7-1 hole. And also, the lineup just couldn't really get those runs across. They weren't getting a ton of traffic on the bases, only 5 hits in the game. So it was just a rough game altogether. Bad defense at times, too. Plays that, could have been made that weren't. The biggest one came in the 9th inning. But before we get to that one, we'll talk about the 4-run rally the Mets had that gave us a little bit of hope. That was in the 8th inning where you had Francisco Lindor double, Mark Vientos reaches on an error by Gunnar Henderson, and then Brandon Nimmo doubles, driving in Lindor. Then with Vientos on third, Nimmo on second, JD Martinez hits a 3-run homer, and the Mets were only down 2 runs going into the 9th inning, but that lead was doubled in the top of the 9th inning as Danny Young gives up a pair. This comes after some good pitching by Adam Ottavino, Ryan Stanek, and Oscar Brazaban to get you to that point. 3 scoreless innings there, but Young ends up giving up a base hit and a walk after getting the first batter out. He gets some soft contact, fly ball in left field to Brandon Nimmo. Nimmo, typically very good coming in on the ball, but he alluded to this after the game. a little more timid after the shoulder injury, so he didn't want to roll over that shoulder hard. Whenever you see Nimmo make those catches, he always seems to have that same move where he dives, catches it, and rolls over that right shoulder. So trying to avoid further injury, he's a little more timid. And as he said, you can't do that. Ball hits off of his glove. That allows the first run to score. He also makes an error on the throw in. And then Danny Young tries to back up the play and throw out the runner at third. He makes a bad throw that allows another run to score. So just a disaster of a play. Really just epitomized what this game was for the Mets, which was just sloppy altogether. And in the ninth inning, they couldn't mount any further comeback. So they lose 9-5. Ultimately, this game comes down to Jose Quintana. We're going to talk about him in the next segment because it's been a really bad month. But I don't know if there's really any alternatives to Quintana in this rotation. What I will say is there were some positive takeaways when you look at the top four in this lineup. Francisco Lindor, 2 for 4. Mark Vientos and Brandon Nimmo, each with RBI doubles. And JD Martinez with another home run. Those four guys, if they can really start going here, that's going to help a lot, especially because you still have Pete Alonso batting 5th in this lineup. Jesse Winker at times batting 6th. Starling Marte being entered back into the mix now, particularly against left-handed pitching. Jeff McNeil's been swinging a hot bat. You know, the hope of maybe Francisco Alvarez building off his walk-off home run. This is a team where the lineup has to carry them. I've talked about this a ton, and it just keeps coming up. But the pitching can't cripple them either. It's got to be something in between, right? You can't just be all on the offense because if the bullpen is blowing leads and the starters are putting you in a hole every night, well, that's not going to help either. The Mets need to get just mediocre pitching, at least from their starters. The way I'd almost look at it, they need their entire pitching staff to go into these games, and the amount of runs they can allow is 4. That's what you have to have in your mind, and the lineup's going to score at least 5. If the Mets can do that consistently down the stretch, they can win enough games to get into the playoffs. But if their bullpen keeps on giving up runs, if they have a scheduled loss every time Jose Quintana takes the mound, it's going to make things probably too difficult for the lineup alone to carry them to victories. You're not going to win. Tonight would have been a 10-9 victory if they pulled it off. That's too tough. That's too much to ask. So can Jose Quintana figure this out? And if not, who are the options to replace him in the rotation? I'll go through that in the next segment. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience are what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports by checking out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. Do the New York Mets have any options to replace Jose Quintana in the rotation? Well, first things first, how bad has Jose Quintana been? Through 25 starts this year, Quintana's pitching to a mid-4s ERA. If you look at a 5th starter in baseball, that is not that bad. For example, Carlos Carrasco last year with the Mets, he pitched to a 6.8 ERA in 20 starts. This year, 21 starts with the Guardians, still pitching. He's got a 5.64 ERA. That is a good team that is running Carrasco out there. There are a lot of 5th starters in baseball that are worse than Jose Quintana. Now, through his 25 starts, the Mets are 12-13 in games that he has started. But that record looked even better a month ago because in August, the Mets are 0-4 when Quintana takes the mound. So through the first part of this season, prior to August, through the trade deadline, they were 12-9 in 21 starts from Jose Quintana. Not exceptional, but there has been a lot of stretches this year where Quintana has been pretty solid. Through the month of April, he had a 3.48 ERA. Then he had a disastrous May with a 7.20 ERA, but a lot of that was one horrible start against the Rays where he gave up 8 runs and got knocked out of the game in the 3rd inning. June, he settled back in 3.38 ERA. July, 2.05 ERA. So really good during that period where the Mets were going on their fantastic run. Having Quintana every 5th day, putting together really solid starts was a big part of that. Now in August, his first start was against the Angels. He gave up 3 runs and 5 innings pitched. I'll sign up for that from here on out. That's all I want from Jose Quintana. Get through 5, give up 3 runs or less. Now, that was the game where the Mets were in line to win, but Huascar Braziban gave up that late home run to the Angels. His next start was against the Mariners. He ended up pitching into the 7th inning, but allowed 5 runs. Then against Oakland, he gives up 4 runs and 4 innings pitched, and then today, disastrous start, 7 runs allowed in 5 innings. If you look at Quintana's 25 starts this year, 19 of them he has gone at least 5. That is an important distinction to make. The fact that he's able to get you through 5 innings. You wanted him to go through 6, ideally, but for a 5th starter to get 5 innings, that's pretty decent. He has allowed more than 3 runs in just 5 of those 19 starts where he's gone at least 5. So in 14 of his 25 starts this year, he has gone at least 5. He's allowed 3 runs or less. Again, that's all I want to see moving forward from Jose Quintana. Can you get through the 5th inning without giving up a 4th run? If you do that, it's on the lineup and then the bullpen to get the job done and still win those games. If the Mets decided to DFA Quintana tomorrow, and they're not going to, but let's just play out the thought exercise. Who are you bringing up? Brandon Sproat still hasn't proven it in AAA. Christian Scott's still hurt. He's coming back. He's throwing, but he hasn't even thrown a bullpen yet. It's not thrown off the mound, so that's not going to happen anytime soon. Kodai Senga is still doing immobilized throwing at this point, which is throwing from a seated position. So he's got to get upright first. We're not going to expect him to come back until the end of September at the absolute best. Your options are Tyler McGill and Mike Vasil. The third one would be Jose Budo, but the bullpen's still an issue. It's not like you have Ryan Stanek killing it. Phil Maton is just lights out every single time. Reed Garrett has stepped back in and he's in April form. Daniel Nunez is back, although that's going to come soon. You still don't have a bullpen that is in a good enough shape to remove Jose Budo, not to mention how long would it take to stretch Budo out? Could he be up to 6 innings pitched by the beginning of September? Probably not. It would probably take a couple times through to get him stretched out again. And then what's he going to look like in that starting pitching role? He has been great coming out of the bullpen. I think this year, you just got to keep him where he's at and get as many good innings as you can from Budo in the pen. Next year, I want him stretched out. I want him in the rotation. I actually think the rotation next season is in pretty good shape with Kodai Senga, David Peterson, Jose Budo, potentially Christian Scott, Brandon Sproat. We'll see what they do with Severino and Minaya hitting free agency and if they end up going after any other free agent starters. But the rotation moving forward is in pretty good shape, and I'm excited to see Budo back there. I just don't think it's this season. So it comes back to McGill or Mike Vasil. Tyler McGill has made 9 starts for the Mets this year. He's got an ERA over 5. Now, in those starts, he has gone at least 5 innings in 6 of the 9 starts. He has given up 4 runs or more in 4 of his 9 starts. There's only been 3 starts of his 9 where he has gone at least 5 innings and given up 3 earned runs or less. Actually, it's been 2 earned runs or less in 2 starts where he went 5 innings, allowed 2. And then the other start, he went 7 scoreless against the Dodgers. So he's really had 1 great start and 2 okay starts. And the rest have been pretty bad. Now, in Syracuse, he's made 2 starts since being sent down this most recent time. First one allowed 4 over 5 innings pitched. Had a dominant start on Sunday where he struck out 11 and pitched into the 8th inning. But he still gave up 4 runs. Are the Mets going to DFA Quintana to give McGill another audition? And then all of a sudden, what happens if somebody else goes down, somebody gets hurt? Now you went from having Jose Quintana to DFAing him and somebody would pick him up to all of a sudden you got Vassell and McGill in your rotation, now your season is pretty much cooked. So the Mets are stuck with Jose Quintana. And to make the case on Vassell, yes, he has pitched better as of late, but he gave up 7 runs his last outing, and he's never pitched in the big leagues. Now, the Mets do have to add him to the 40-man this offseason. So if he gets called up in September, I wouldn't be surprised if that was a spot start opportunity or, if they just needed some length out of the bullpen for whatever reason. But I don't think Vassell or McGill is enough of an upgrade where you're going to make that swap. And then again, lose Quintana for the rest of this year because you're going to have to DFA him. He's got to try to figure this thing out. And the good news is he's had stretches this year where he has been very effective. He's got to be a better version of himself this upcoming month. And I think he can get there. But there's a lot more pressure on Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, David Peterson in particular, and also Paul Blackburn to really carry this rotation because they are bringing around a guy in their 5th starter spot that you really can't count on the Mets to win in those days. You hope that they will win some of them. And if you go by record this season, they have been about 500 with Quintana on the mound. And prior to this month, they were better than that. So there is a world where he's going to be just fine, but it is a cause of concern for sure. Now, because I was pulling up team record with the pitcher on the mound, let's run through the rest of the Mets starters. David Peterson, I've already talked about this a bunch, but it's always worth mentioning. The Mets are 11-3 when Peterson is on the mound. Now, Paul Blackburn's only made 4 starts. They won 2, they lost 2. Most recent one was not his fault. That was the game where he goes 6 innings, gives up 1. Fortunately, the Mets drop it late. Then you have his time with the A's this year, and Paul Blackburn's A's were 7-2 when he was on the mound. So gives his team a chance to win. Luis Severino, what do you think the Mets record is when Sevy is on the hill? They're 12-12. They're 500. When Sean Manaea is on the mound, they're 16-8. I don't think there's ever been this clear of a delineation this year on who the ace is and down the line in the pecking order. I would say at this point, Sean Manaea is the ace. Sevy is still the 2 because he can give you those brilliant starts and he gives you length in a way that David Peterson does not. Peterson's the 3, and then it's Blackburn, then it's Quintana. You have that as your rotation. That's the group the Mets are going to go to war with. It's not the best, but it's what you have to live and die with down the stretch here because there really are no alternatives until you get a Christian Scott back or a Kodai Senga back, or if the Mets decide to go to Brandon Sproat. But that would be more of a Hail Mary play, and I think it's easier to imagine Sproat in the bullpen than in the rotation. You never know, though. If it comes down to it and you don't have Christian Scott ready and you don't have Kodai Senga ready, and Quintana puts together 3 more bad starts from here, and Sproat is lights out in his next 3 turns, and you got a couple weeks left in the season, there might be a world where the Mets say, you know what, we're going to DFA Quintana, and we're going to give Sproat a shot. So we'll see how it all works out, but the Mets are going to need more from Quintana moving forward because there really is not an alternative. They're also going to need Sean Manaea to deliver a series victory on Wednesday. I want to talk about this upcoming game in the next segment here. I also want to touch on the bullpen. Daniel Nunez should be back. There's going to be some movement in that pen. I'll talk about what that's going to look like heading into the road trip in just a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. You watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. So you can turn $10 into $1,000. If you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered each week. From lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit, or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, run your game. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways, and you get the lineup graphic sent to your phone each day. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, final game of this series against the Orioles in the last game of this homestand before the Mets hit the road for 4 against the Padres this week, 3 against the Diamondbacks next week, and 3 against the White Sox. So the last leg of that road trip should be the best one, but it's going to be a very, very tough trip altogether with those first 7 games. You want to go into that trip off of a series victory, and luckily for the Mets, they do have the big pitching edge in this game. It was going to be Sean Manaea versus Zach Eflin. Eflin hit the IL with shoulder inflammation, so instead the Orioles claimed the contract of Cole Irvin, brought him back up. Irving was with this team for a large portion of this season, pitched to a 4.85 ERA. He was out of the rotation in July, pitching in long relief, then outrighted after all the moves the Orioles made at the deadline. So he was off the 40-man roster, ended up getting assigned back to their AAA team. And after making a couple of appearances there, he's coming right back up to replace Eflin. This is a left-handed pitcher, so expect the right-handed lineup for the Mets. Iglesias starting at second, Marte back in right. I'd imagine you'd have either Tyrone Taylor or Harrison Bader in center. If not, Nimmo getting another day, and both of those guys being in the lineup against the lefty with Nimmo coming off the bench. That is a possibility. And I would also expect Luis Torrens to start behind the dish, as he has an 856 OPS against left-handed pitching this year. And this is a day game after a night game. I mean, Manaea does pitch well with Francisco Alvarez catching him, but I think Torrens probably gets this start. Now, Manaea's got to deliver here. As I mentioned before, the Mets are 16-8 in his starts. That's why he's been the ace of the team this year. And this is a game you got to have. So Sean Manaea has to come through. When it comes to the state of the bullpen behind Manaea for this game, a lot of arms were used today. You had Huascar Brazaban used, Stanek, Ottavino, and Danny Young. But some of your better relievers were not used. That's Phil Maton, Edwin Diaz, Jose Budo. Budo typically gets 2 days off in between appearances, and he pitched on Monday, but he only went 1 inning Monday. So I would be curious if Budo would be good to go for this one. That would be a huge benefit for the Mets. Maybe not, though. They might save him up, have him ready to go for that series in San Diego. That's going to be a really important series. So maybe you want to hold off on pitching him so you can get some long relief. If you get 6 innings from your starter and you want that bridge straight to Edwin Diaz, a guy that can come in and pitch 2 innings, maybe they don't use Budo. I imagine if Carlos Mendoza was scripting out his perfect game, it would be probably 7 from Manaea, and then you can just go Maton to Diaz. They also have Reed Garrett rested, so that would be the other option. And I think it'll be interesting if they do get Garrett in the game, because there's a chance he gets chance he gets optioned. Excuse me. That's if it was a DFA situation, his spot would be safe because he does have an option. Remember, he did not start the season on the Mets roster. He started in Syracuse, quickly came up, thrived in those early parts of the season until it got to May, and then it was sort of up and down for him. Reed Garrett does not have a completely solidified spot on this roster. If he goes out and if the Mets are winning a game and he blows it, or if it's a lopsided game either direction and he still comes in a pitch and he walks a couple guys, there's a world where he is the corresponding move for Daniel Nunez. I talked about this a couple days ago, how Nunez could come back, and Garrett is one of the guys on the bubble to potentially be sent down. Nunez pitched a scoreless inning in Syracuse on Tuesday night. He touched 97 on his fastball. He's going to be back for this road trip. The Mets desperately need him. He's their 8th inning guy. So with Nunez back in the fold, the Mets get better. The question just is, who gets sent down? It could be Garrett. It could be Brazaban. I think the most likely name is probably Danny Young, although that would leave you without a lefty. But I think if I had to guess, it'll be Danny Young. I can't necessarily see them as DFAing Ryan Stanek or Adam Ottavino. It just comes back to the depth of your roster and the upside those guys still present as experienced relievers who have done it before. They both had a good inning tonight too. So that's probably the last impression they will leave before the Mets have to make their roster decision. And so I think those two guys likely stay. You'll also have Alex Young that is still pitching well in Syracuse. He went 4 outs tonight and got a win. DJ Stewart hit a walk-off home run. Alex Young could become the lefty in this bullpen as soon as, well, really a couple days. He got sent down on the 10th. But I could see the Mets going no lefty in the pen for this road trip. You come home in September, and Alex Young might be the guy that they would add as the 28th man on the roster, the September call-up. Now, they can then flip Danny Young and Alex Young for the final month of the season. If you were to option Danny Young now, you're starting the clock on his 15-day stint in AAA. So that would give you that ability to get that fresh arm at some point early in September. Just another option. The Mets are going to have a lot of guys, I think, coming in and out in September with the extra roster spot. You can say the same thing about Garrett or Brazoban, right? If you were to option one of them now for Nunez, you would start that clock where you're going to be able to get them back at some point in September. Maybe it does make sense if Reed Garrett has another bad outing, or even if he doesn't, to option him and let him work and get his stuff in a really good place. And then he becomes your 28th man in September. It's going to be interesting to see what they do for Nunez to come back up, but that's going to be such a big addition. All of a sudden, you'll have Edwin Diaz, Daniel Nunez, Jose Budo, and Phil Maton. Finally, 4 guys you can trust in that pen. Behind them, if it is Danny Young that goes down, it'd be Reed Garrett, Brazoban, Stanek, Ottavino. If Garrett goes down, it's just Young, Brazoban, Stanek, Ottavino. I feel like Brazoban's going to stay, and I think Stanek and Ottavino are going to stay. So we'll see what the carousel ends up coming up with when it comes to these relievers cycling through. But Nunez returning is going to be a massive, massive addition down the stretch. He has been their best reliever this season. That's including Edwin Diaz. By value, when it comes to WAR, Daniel Nunez has been the most valuable pitcher the Mets have had in that bullpen. Unless Jose Budo has caught him, those two guys have really been the huge godsend these last couple months, and they're going to be relied heavily upon in the final month of this season. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. On tomorrow's show, I'll be covering final game of this series against the Orioles and then previewing the road ahead against the Padres. Make sure you check it out. If you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. The goal is to get to 10,000 subs by the end of this season. We're 700 away, so I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel. Covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local experts from each team, our league-wide experts from each league. You find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.